Hey there, miniature painters. In recognition of Movember, we're going to paint up Mike and his glorious mustache for the Cthulhu Death May Die board game. On a side note, I got a new lens and overhead filming rig for painting miniatures that will unfortunately negatively impact these next two videos as I ran into some technical difficulties. I think I've got it all sorted out now, so hopefully going forward there will be an improvement in production quality, but for now, bear with me and let's get started painting up Mike. And welcome to Trehane Miniatures. I begin by applying an ink blue spray paint over the black primer from the underside of the miniature, as demonstrated here on this test model. I'm spraying this just to the back left side of the miniature, and this will form the foundation for a blue backlight OSL effect. I think that many painters see OSL as a time-consuming step, but I tend to use it primarily as a time saver to avoid having to fully paint the backside of a miniature. It also inherently creates a heavy contrast in the piece between light and dark through this dynamic lighting effect. This step is easily skipped over by simply painting the rear of the model with the same colors as you use on the front. It's up to you. With the foundation for the blue OSL in place, I base coat the rest of the model in its entirety with Dark Plum by Monument Hobbies. I'm continuing to use Dark Plum as the extreme shadow color for the miniatures in this game because I absolutely love it. Ninja nailed it with this color. A quick note about this new filming setup that I'm using. Because I failed to make adjustments to my camera to accommodate the new lens that I'm using, I ended up with extremely dark footage to the point where I had to significantly boost the brightness in editing. So the whites may look pretty blown out for much of this video. It does get better near the end, but that's what I get for being tech-tarded. To start building the skin tones, I mix flat flesh with the dark plum. I tested a couple of other skin tone paints, such as basic skin tone, before deciding on the flat flesh. The flat flesh has a little more of an orange hue to it that will keep this mix from appearing too pink, which is what happened when mixed with the lighter skin tone colors. This is a secondary shadow color that is covering most of the dark plum layer that came before it, so we still want it to lean a little to the purple side. I also use this as a glaze to smooth the transition between muscle groups where I don't want such stark contrast between shaded areas and the highlights. A good example of this is a shadow area between the bicep and deltoid. I don't want dark separation between these two areas. Now we move on to flat flesh all on its own as the midtone color for the skin. I start picking out all of Mike's features that are facing upward or outward on the model. This is a point where we begin to build details on the model. I create some muscle separation in the deltoids and quads and accentuate prominent features of the face like the angled jaw and his cheekbones. Oh, and since I've mentioned Movember, I might as well say a little something about it for those who aren't aware. Movember is an excuse for men to grow a mustache during the month of November under the guise of bringing attention to men's health issues, and I'm all for it. The reality, however, is that we're men. We aren't exactly proactive about preventative maintenance when it comes to our health. Most of us are only going to go to the doctor when something is broken or if something hurts to the point where it becomes unbearable. What I will say about this is, be your own advocate. When you do find yourself needing the doctor because something ain't right and the professionals tell you that they can't find anything wrong or they want to take a wait-and-see attitude about your health concern, you don't have to accept that answer. You can continue to pursue a solution. We like to get second opinions when we hear bad news, but we can also get a second opinion if we receive good news when we know that something's not quite right. But more about that in a bit. Back to Mike. If we happen to overdo the flat flesh in any area or it becomes a little chalky, we can always use a thin mixture of the previous color to glaze it back into conformity. Let's add a little ice yellow to the flat flesh and start building our highlights. This will be the brightest highlight for the knees, upper thighs, and arms. These highlights are drawn to the upper part of each muscle where it meets the shadow of the muscle above it. This is particularly important where the bicep meets the deltoid. Tangent time again. So much to talk about that isn't painting in this video. Anyway, one issue that I'm having with the new overhead filming rig is that the ball joints in the arm that holds the camera aren't strong enough to hold the camera in place. So the camera slowly drifts forward out of position as I'm painting, causing the miniature to creep towards the bottom of the screen. I lost a little footage because of this, like where I'm highlighting the upper thighs and knees with this color. A new arm for the rig did come in today, so it should be all good going forward. Okay, our final highlight is made up of pure ice yellow. These will be very small, conservative highlights. We will use this just to brighten the right shoulder, upper chest, and facial features. I'm making sure to focus these only on the right side of the miniature's body so that it appears that the light is coming from the model's upper right side. On a positive note about this new setup that I'm using, once I get this camera set up correctly, I think it will show you a more honest look at these painted miniatures. The new lens is a 100mm macro lens that is capable of some extreme close-up shots, so you'll be able to see every little brushstroke and flaw in my painted pieces. It may sound like a negative, but I'm pretty excited about it. I think that my paint jobs are very approachable, but I think that some painters over-criticize their own work because of how closely they're inspecting it. I'd love for you to see the little flaws and hiccups in my work as well. And now it's Movember time. Mike's stash and his eyebrows are base coated with some Payne's Gray Pro Acryl. This is a very dark blue-gray that will read as black against the brightly highlighted skin. And then the mustache, and the mustache only, is highlighted with Wolf Gray, which is a very light blue-gray. This is applied with just a few dots across the upholstery. Since the Strongman unitard is already based with dark plum, we'll jump straight to purple Vallejo paint for the main color of the suit. I will build up this color in a couple of passes so it blends into the shadow areas more naturally. I'm making sure to leave the model's left side darker than its right side. I really enjoy painting these simpler models that have just a few colors to the scheme. It allows me to pay more attention to each and every step of the process because there are fewer steps. I've noticed that when painting more complex sculpts that my enthusiasm starts to wane as a project time extends past the 3 to 5 hour mark. Our first and only highlight for the unitard is made with a mix of purple and ice yellow by Vallejo. This is going to shift the purple towards the pink range, but that's okay. I'll add a little more ice yellow for a final pass of highlight just on the upper chest and ribbed openings around the neck and arms. Unitards are really a package deal, where once you commit to painting the upper part, you're pretty much obligated to paint the package. Speaking of packages, I'll quickly share my story about how I was not a good patient advocate for myself. And I really hope that this does not come across as preachy because I hate that shit. Anyway, I was having some trouble with my dangly bits, so I went to get them checked out, and this was in January of 2023. After a couple of doctor visits and some test results, the doc said that some things were going on, variceals, hydrocele, cysts, but they didn't see anything too serious, so let's wait and see if things get worse. Well, things got worse, and I started down the path again in 2024 to get things resolved. Long story short, on September 18th of this year, I had surgery on my courage sac. My sac was filleted wide open from tip to taint to deal with the issue. It was a very invasive surgery with an uncomfortable recovery, to say the least. I can't help but think that if I was more persistent early on, that this could have been resolved in a less invasive manner. So that's why I say you should be a good patient advocate for yourself. No one wants to hear bad medical news, so when the doctor says that everything is fine, even if we feel it's not fine, we tend to breathe a sigh of relief and just go about our business. In my case, I should have been more diligent. Now let's paint some leather. All of Mike's leather bits get some chocolate brown applied directly over the dark plum layer. We will cover them pretty quickly, allowing some of the dark plum to show through in the deepest shadows. After all of the leather is covered in chocolate, we're going to briefly return to our Payne's Gray to base coat the metal accoutrements on the belt. We will highlight this leather with the very appropriately named leather brown. We're going to hit most of the edges and throw a few scratches on the belt here and there. The arm wraps are very easily highlighted by drawing the side of the brush across the raised surfaces. The boots get minimal highlights along the laces and upward facing parts of the boot. Next, I intensify these highlights by adding a little ice yellow to the leather brown. On the belt, I focus heavily on the area of leather that would receive the most stress, such as the part of the belt that connects to the buckle and the edges of the belt. On the boots, only the laces get a little additional highlight. The final thing to paint before we move on to the blue backlight is Mike's weapon, which I'll paint simply with a couple of metallic paints. I'm using Gunmetal by the Army Painter to paint a wide band of silver down the length of the staff. To maintain a metallic look, I'm not covering all of the black primer. I only paint the part of the bar that is facing the light source, which is up and to the model's right. I also apply the paint with short strokes that run along the short diameter of the cylindrical bar. The game art shows some blood on the metal bar, but I generally don't like painting blood effects on my miniatures unless I'm trying to cover up a glaring mistake. I also throw a base of this color on the model's belt buckle and rivets on the belt. Once this is all finished, I simply add a line of shining silver down the length of the weapon. I continue to use short strokes across the short cross section of the bar so that it looks like light is interacting with the metallic surface. The belt buckle and tiny rivets on the belt also get a little dot of this shining silver. Finally, I'm going to use electric blue over the ink blue spray paint to finish up the blue bounce light effect. This is honestly much quicker than painting all of the flesh and cloth on the backside of the miniature. Basically, I'm just painting little lines and dashes across any of the features that would be hit by the blue light coming from the lower left. To get the nice straight line on the bar, I use the reflection from my desk light on the bar to guide a perfectly straight line. Alright, that wraps up painting Mike for the Cthulhu Death May Die board game. Hopefully I didn't turn any of you off by talking about my nads. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to join our growing community of painters. Oh, and for those who are curious, both my oysters are still intact.